Good evening, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to News in Focus. My name is Faraz Patel. We'd like to thank you, the viewer, for staying with us here on Hilaal TV, channel 347 on DSTV. Now, upcoming on the 23rd of November, there will be the Ummah Tech Conference. It's going with the slogan, Faith Meets Technology. It will be happening at the Wanderers Cricket Stadium in Johannesburg. Now, this is said to see tech innovators, entrepreneurs, and they will conclude with each other to find a way on talking of the future of technology, but how it intertwines with the faith of Islam. And joining me, I'd like to welcome the event director, Ismail Dhorat. Ismail, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and jazakallah so much for joining us.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Good to be here.
No, it's an absolute pleasure. I think, you know, when we look at technology now, Ismail, it's of course the big talking point is the industrial revolution. How have you seen it so far in the year 2024?
So I think we're seeing unprecedented change. We're seeing massive innovation. I mean, lots of innovation. AI is, you know, increasing in leaps and bounds. So we've got to look at these technologies and say, what's the implication on the Muslim Ummah and the community? You see the rise of social media. I mean, you know, when I was growing up, we had a very limited access to information. Yes. We weren't exposed to ideas that were contradictory to Islam, that were contradictory to our own views. Nowadays, with social media, you're being exposed to a lot of, let's call it, bad ideas. And that's going to impact on us and the community. And the question is, how do we respond to these challenges?
Yeah, I'm going to touch on AI in a bit because it's such a wide-ranging topic. And I mean, you'll be able to talk to us with regards to that. I want to go sector by sector, Ismail. And I want to start off with banking. Banking's become so simplistic that all you do is you take your phone and you're able to make the payments or receive the payments. From an Islamic perspective, how do we view online banking as a way that we can embrace as a community through a Muslim perspective?
So interesting question, yeah. So I think there are, you know, some of the Islamic banks that have made, you know, going in that direction, and we've obviously got the big banks. But I was listening to, you know, an expert in Islamic finance recently. I was listening to his talk, and he was saying, you know, a lot of what we try to do in the Islamic finance side is we look at a contract that is non-Islamic and then we try to Islamicize it. And he was making the case for we should actually start from first principles and start with the Islamic principles and build up to something that's completely new and innovative and different.
Yeah, and with banking also you're getting the online shopping. We've seen e-commerce grow. We've seen it become now the more, I mean, this especially given what had happened during COVID-19. And I'm going to touch on COVID-19 in a bit. That many of the citizens, when I speak to fellow Muslims, they're saying, you know, it's online shopping. We prefer now this instance. How do we get Muslim minds to challenge the likes of the Takealots and the Amazons and the Sheins and so forth so that they can own a space within the market?
Yeah, I think that's a very good question because, you know, with COVID, as you so mentioned, we had a massive drive. It accelerated the drive to online shopping and to e-commerce. And I think if retailers, our traditional retailers, do not have a strategy for online, they do not have a strategy of optimizing their processes and using technology in their businesses, they're going to be left behind. So, I mean, the conference we're trying to do is encourage you know, people to think about these things. And as you rightly say, we need to think about ways of competing with the, let's call it the big monopolies of the world.
Course, yeah.
Sometimes they may have more resources, but we've got to find our niches and ways to compete.
The lovely thing about Hilaal TV is that, you know, many people also, you know, view it on various other platforms like YouTube and Facebook, especially when there's big events. And it comes to the next question about the future of streaming, because streaming is obviously taking quite a big chunk of the market. It's also at the same time really becoming the in thing now for many users across the country. How do Muslim content creators, and I'm sure this conference is going to allow that, and I'm going to touch on CTV, which has actually become quite large. How do Muslim content creators say, all right, let's create our content so we can challenge the other platforms that are also allowing there to be streaming services where content can be accessible for the public out there?
Yeah, so I think you've hit on a few trends. You're seeing the massive, let's call it, move to streaming services, plus the way the newer generation is consuming content is a lot different. Like if I think back to my children, they don't understand the concept of linear TV.
Yes, of course, yeah.
They only understand, on demand, short attention spans. And you mentioned Scene TV. Scene TV is what you would call a new media organization. One of the producers will be speaking at the conference.
Yes, yeah.
And she will be talking about how to go viral. And I think we can use these technologies in a bad way, or we can use it for good, and use it to spread the message of Islam, spread good messages, make people think and reflect. But there's also let's call it a negative side to some of these technologies. And I think one of the drivers for us getting this conference off the ground was how do we start thinking about building our own infrastructure, because of the the crisis in Gaza has shown us how much of power these platforms hold. A report came out recently how Meta is stifling Palestinian content.
Of course, yeah.
And we're so reliant. So they claim that they value neutral, but those organizations at the back have people running them who have, sort of agendas and values. So they're going to influence the technology in that. So we want to create, let's call it a more equitable and justice-based world. And I think what Islam has to offer the world is very valuable. And if we can bring that and imbue that in our technology, I think we will create benefit for society.
There's something interesting you brought about, obviously, the genocide that's happening in Gaza. And we've seen journalists using their phones to tell the story. The mobile phones now with the smartphone has become such a massive tool for information. Now, you won't see that maybe in the major news outlets, what is actually being reported on the ground in Gaza and in the occupied West Bank. Scene TV has, of course, Ahmed Ghunaim, who's now living in South Africa, is a classic example of that. And then, you also have Maulanas and Sheikhs who are giving bayans off the phone. And it's accessible to everybody and on social media. There's your shift right there, isn't there? Where you would have to go to a masjid, and of course it's still valuable to go to a masjid to get that information from a Maulana, because you're reaping in so much of benefits, not for this world but for the next. But now if you want something instant, it's changed, hasn't it? You can listen to advice, nasiha, right on your phone.
Yeah, I think it has changed. So you can get that benefit. You get a lot of, let's call it, good advice, good nasiha, lectures online. You can learn practically, anything. There's free Islamic courses online. So whatever knowledge you want to learn, you can learn it online. But it's also a double-edged sword, right? Because you could have what they call YouTube sheikhs, communicating bad ideas. You've got to be very careful about what you consume, how you consume it. Lots of misinformation. And speaking about Gaza, one of the projects we saw was very, very, let's call it successful, I think successful, was it came out from the UK to counter misinformation related to Gaza.
Yes.
And to counter the Israeli narrative. And that was one of the projects that came out, and a few other projects that made me realize what's the importance of having a tech ecosystem that can collaborate and respond to crisis. You mentioned COVID. During COVID, I was part of some networks, and we were pulled in to develop some projects to respond to the crisis. Whereas in South Africa, we had a very huge humanitarian response to the crisis in Gaza, but there wasn't really any tech projects that were launched in South Africa. So I think that was one of the sort of driving goals and driving realizations to see what we can do to facilitate that in South Africa.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I mean, Emergivac is one organization which is, of course, run by Muslims, a medical insurance company, where they actually, a lot of things can be done via the app. So we see it happening. We see slowly but surely, Muslims coming to the fore and saying, let's get involved. Because app stores now, to get applications on the phone, is something that, I would assume that this conference would be open to saying, let's bring minds together so that people can bring ideas of apps into it, which we can initiate.
Yeah, so I think the idea is to, one, educate people, inspire them to think about solutions, and to connect with each other so they can then collaborate. So as an example, I attended a similar conference in London, Ummah Tech Fest. They're also helping us to get this off the ground and partnering with us. And I had met somebody from Canada who had developed a solution for the NGO sector.
Yes.
And someone had contacted me like 2 months before that to develop almost exactly the same solution. So I put them in contact, and now, shukr alhamdulillah, they're working on a project in Cape Town that will benefit a community in Cape Town.
Ismail, the creating of an ecosystem, we were talking about it off air. How important is it that this ecosystem manifests itself in a good way so that the next conference, even brighter and better ideas are concluded?
Yeah, so I think, I mentioned I attended the Ummah Tech Fest in London. And after the genocide in Gaza started happening, I started noticing a lot of projects coming out of the UK and US. And I was trying to figure out why. And when I attended there, I realized the reason. I mean, they've got a very strong ecosystem. So they were able to respond to that crisis by organizing hackathons and a whole bunch of things, events, talks, all of that. So I think if we have a similar sort of ecosystem in South Africa where we can, create this ecosystem where guys are collaborating with each other, we can also respond to crisis and act together and help one another.
Ismail, I see there's a number of people that can attend. You founders, entrepreneurs, the invitations open, coders, innovators. This is, of course, skill sets that if the Muslim community in South Africa is going to build, and own the tech space, I mean, these are the sort of minds that are needed, isn't it?
Yeah, so I mean, it's open to technologists, founders, startup founders, and we've got a various range of topics that will, cater for all of these people. Even people who are thinking about, they want to leave the corporate career, they want to do a startup, they want to do a business in tech, they want to move to tech. Maybe they're looking to do something more meaningful and impactful in the world. They may get inspired by coming there. Someone who's maybe not in the tech industry, wants to get in, wants to learn more, they could come in and learn something that will then inspire them to move on to do something beneficial for the Ummah and society.
Ismail, let's go to artificial intelligence. Just this week, and of course people would say, it's quite scary. Google said that they're going to go through a nuclear system to try and power up its AI. What is the relationship, I mean, as we speak, and I'm sure this will evolve, between Islam and AI? Should we just completely disregard it? Or is it something that we need to look at, but that cannot be abused, but used in a way to benefit the community of Muslims within South Africa?
So that's a very, very, very interesting question. I mean, there's research groups and Muslim people that are now researching and looking at AI and trying to understand what's the, firstly, ethical implications, what's the impact on Islam. So I think there's a few sort of questions. One from a philosophical perspective, humans are by their nature conscious and have something unique to us. And whether a machine can actually have that consciousness, that's an unopened question. The AI, people almost treat it like a religion, if I want to say. Yeah. They're like, okay, we're going to get AI and we're going to get... I remain not completely convinced. And the reason why I say that is we humans, we're limited in our capacity and our knowledge. One, we overestimate how much we know. And every single time we've thought we figured out something, we found that there was more complexity. There were things that we didn't understand, right? So I think that's the first point. In terms of its impact on, on Islam, there's obviously research being done there. I think it can be used as a tool, to facilitate a lot of things. It can help us, in many different ways, building AI tools and things like that. But there's also concerns and ethical concerns that we need to be worried about, right? From a, let's call it, chatbot perspective, if you build sort of online chatbot shake that's trained like ChatGPT on a whole bunch of stuff. I've seen sort of projects like that, but we need to be very careful on how we implement those technologies, because remember, Islamically, we have a very strong oral tradition in terms of knowledge transmission. We have a very strong tradition of verifying information, making sure like a hadith has a chain of transmitters and all of those things. So can an AI system be trained on all of those things? And when we're educating our youngsters, when they're using it, that they need to be able to recognize that maybe the information it produces is incorrect.
Yeah, I mean, you bring up such an important point with regards to ChatGPT, but all these AI systems, and when we speak of cradle to the grave, there's only one source of information, and that's Holy Quran, Hadith. And I think it's going to take a long time. I agree with you to try and get to using AI in an ethical way. But yeah, I think I'm in agreement with you there. There's a big question mark, really with regards to AI. Ismail, the URL, if people want to find information, what can they do if they really want to, if it's just somebody out there that wants to learn, even if they don't have either of these skill sets, they just want to understand the Ummah Tech Conference and why it's a necessity. What can they do?
Okay, yeah, so, on the topic of AI, we've got two specialists on AI specifically, actually more than two, but two, particularly important topics. One guy is a researcher on AI and reasoning systems, so he's going to touch on that, and somebody who's going to speak on the ethics of AI. So, it's important topics that we need to be concerned about, educating our youth. They can go to our website, it's Ummah Tech, UMMAH.net, ummahtech.net, or they go to Quicket and search for Ummah Tech, they'll find us.
One final question to wrap up this conversation, Ismail. At the end of this conference, what is it that not just you, but everyone coming there, the minds that are coming there, can take out of this conference and say, let's build something solid, not just for 2025, but beyond? Yeah,
so I think it's an important question. I think if it can inspire people to not only think about what technologies to build, but also what technologies that's going to have a benefit for society and the social world. One of my teachers in the course I'm doing, he talks about the difference between the Islamic design, way of doing design and architecture. If you see, wherever you go in the Islamic world, the kalima is there, or the Prophet ﷺ's name is there. So, in his view, and what he says is, we design our stuff for remembrance. So, our technology is not designed for distraction, of course, like Facebook and Instagram. So if we can just think about changing people's minds and inspiring them to do something different, that'll be a well-worn objective, inshallah.
Ismail, jazakallah so much for joining us here on Hilaal TV, for making the time for coming, and all the best ahead of the conference. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make it a successful one, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam.
That's Ismail Dhorat. He is the event organizer for the upcoming Ummah Tech Conference. If you want to visit it, go ahead. Wanderers Cricket Ground, 23rd of November. It starts in the morning, ends in the afternoon. If you want to understand the tech world, and if you are a tech genius yourself and you want to contribute, the floor is open for you at that conference. That's all we have for you on News in Focus. From myself, Firas Patel, and the rest of the team in Johannesburg, have yourself a good weekend, but most importantly, a safe one. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.